were you thinking 3 months, I need to lock it in?
Why are you looking at me like you think I'm your wife? And he responded and he looked me square in the eye and said, because you are, I'm gonna marry you.
You're stuck with this person forever.
You haven't seen the real me.
And I was like, the mayor or the president, I'd say like we should all get married in 7 months. Like figure it out or break up so people don't date forever and then have heartbroken issues.
Have we lost our minds? Like people don't do this.
It's so interesting to hear perspectives of people that find who they are when their identity has never been built by society.
I'm just here for the plot.
When you had your list, did you have race?
But she turned out to be white.
Welcome back to the Couples Edition with Ali and Ely. As you can see again, we have a unique setup today with some special guests.
Yes, and we are going deeper into part 2 about life, marriage, dating, all the things around relationships. And we have some awesome conversations that'll be happening with these young ladies. So tune in for part 2 and really excited for this conversation. We actually got together yesterday for a goodbye party of a friend of mine. And as we were talking about relationships, these ladies had so many questions. And so we invited them to our podcast. And so we will be talking about all things dating, relationships, marriage, and all the spicy things that anyone would want to know, especially these ladies. So we'll dive right into it.
Nothing is TMI, so ask away.
Absolutely.
How did the 3 months come into the picture? Like, were you thinking 3 months, I need to lock it in? Or was did it just so happen to be 3 months? And I guess now that you're married, in hindsight, would you also recommend 3 months? Because I know some friends who have been together and they're like 6 months in, like, oh, they're the one. I'm going to like go ring shopping. But then that's when it started going downhill.
Yeah.
So I think that I generally hold the knowledge of like, it doesn't hurt to wait.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear your thoughts on it as someone who's didn't do that. You know?
sure.
And that's okay.
I think that is a great question because I think we've said multiple times before on this podcast is that we do not recommend what we did to the average person. We don't feel like how we did it was average. I think we are both naturally so intentional and we came into this knowing exactly who we both were and what we wanted. I think something that I really preach and believe is that you need to be a whole 100% human before getting married to somebody else. Because if you're going into marriage expecting that somebody else is going to complete you or fill your gap, you're looking for some of the wrong things. And I think that can sometimes create unalignment as well. And so I think just because we were so intentional on both knowing who we are and where we're going, but also what we wanted, that when those boxes started to check, it really was just a, whoa, we found it. This is right. Let's bring mentorship in, because I thought we were crazy. About a month into dating, I said, why are you looking at me like you think I'm your wife? And he responded and he looked me square in the eye and said, because you are, I'm going to marry you. And that didn't shock me that much because I already suspected that's where what was happening, because he was just being so direct. Like just the way he was looking at me, I was like, he's looking at me like I'm his wife.
Yeah.
And I was more of the mindset of like one day at a time. That's too much, too fast, too soon. And then about 3 weeks later, I describe it as like the clouds parted. And all of a sudden, I just had such clarity and peace that this was my husband.
That's me.
And there was never a point in the entire time from dating to engagement or engagement to marriage that there was a single red flag or a single hesitation of like, oh, I don't know if I've looked into this enough. Yeah. And I think partially what helped was when we found people to counsel us, they actually started doing premarital counseling with us, like while we were still dating. We weren't even engaged yet. We didn't ask them to do that. They just sent us these books and then we started going through them. And then we were like, wait, is this premarital counseling?
Yeah.
But that like helped us ask a lot of questions that most people don't even ask before marriage. And so I think for us, we were just literally everything aligned. And I really do believe it was because it was God's timing and that was what he had for us. But I do not think that's normal. And I do not think in many cases that would be wise. I think we had the right personalities, the right intention at the right time, because it was also during COVID where we just had uninterrupted time together. So we were able to grow and spend way more time together than you would in a normal life when you're going to work every day and you have stuff after work. We literally weren't doing anything else. Everything was closed. Yeah. We just had so much time to spend together. So while I think it was the right choice for us, we didn't feel like we were rushing it. We felt like we know that we know. We just want to start our life together. That was it. There was nothing that we were like trying to rush it for or like it needs to be sooner. We were just like, we know, let's get the show on the road. How long does it take to plan a wedding?
Yeah.
And even then, it wasn't like because we were trying to rush it because I mentioned like we hadn't had sex yet. That was not even like a factor. We weren't like trying to rush towards anything. We just wanted to start our life together. But I 1000% do not think that's normal. And I do not recommend that. And I think if anything, people can take away some of the things we did in regards to like questions we asked, intentionality we had. But I don't think they need to take away our timing.
Yeah. Allie can say that she doesn't recommend that. I kind of agree with that, kind of don't. And here's my kicker is I think when you meet someone, I think you should be really intentional because like that'll just like make things a lot easier. But I think you should ask yourself, or you and that person, a question. You should ask, hey, what do we need to know about each other to like know where we're going? When you ask that, then you come up with like some kind of like shared agreement that like, hey, I want to meet your mom. I'd like to meet your dad. I'd like to see like where you work. I'd like to, I don't know, maybe do a small trip together. I'd like to go to a barbecue with your family and see what they're like. Because then you align on like, hey, these are the things that we need to know to see if we're a good fit. And that way I feel like it's not this, I got a boyfriend, but we might be dating for 8-10 years. And if you want that, by all means, have that, right? But at least be clear. If you want the 8 years and like plan for the 8 years. So it isn't that I against what you're saying about, people shouldn't do the 3 months thing. I'm just saying that you should have kind of like a game plan together. I'm like, what do we need to know to figure out where we're going? So as we reach those milestones, we're gaining our confidence and moving forward positively.
How did you have the courage to pursue an unconventional timeline and not let societal expectations get to you?
I'll add that
Ely doesn't care about societal expectations.
I really don't. It's all kind of just made up, right? Because if you look at like different cultures, all the different cultures are just very different. If you go to like Asia, they practice marriage in a very different way. And so does Africa, and so does Europe, and then America. So there's all these different ways that you can do marriage. What makes the most sense to me is how do I want to do it? And how does it work best for us? And so for me, like the 3 month to, and the 7 month timeline made a lot of sense because it's like, that's what I want to do. And if I was creating this like new country and I was like the mayor or the president, I'd say like, we should all get married in 7 months. Like figure it out or break up so people don't date forever and then have heartbroken issues. So that made a lot of sense to me just because I was like, I want to create our own thing so we feel good about it. And if we feel good about it, then we can move on that timeline versus thinking, oh, well, because I'm African, I'm from the Congo, and we have different ways of getting married as well. We have traditional ways of getting married. So I didn't want to walk through all those steps just because of like where I was born and where I came from, because then I'd feel like I wasn't really being who I wanted to be. So I don't know.
I'm not to his extreme about not caring about societal expectations, but I also have tended to do what I want when I want. So even like when we quit our jobs to travel the world, our families were like, don't do it, that's crazy. And we were like, we're doing it. So I think to a certain extent, we're also unique that we don't care that much about society's expectations. I think the only thing I was worried about is that it is general good practice to date at least a year before getting married. I think I've heard that said so many times. Like I think I've heard people preach like you should not get married in less than a year. And I think that is generally a good rule of thumb. And so if anything, that was the only thing that kind of held me back was like, are we crazy? Which I said often, like,
yeah,
are we crazy?
Yeah,
which is why it was so important to me to get mentorship. A seasoned couple who not only had been married a long time, but also counseled a lot of people. And so when we started talking to them, and I literally had a one-on-one call with the wife, and I was like, have we lost our minds? Like, people don't do this. And she was like, actually, we've counseled many couples who have gotten married actually even quicker, and they've been married 20 years. And we were like, oh, so I think almost on the negative side of societal expectations too, sometimes we normalize things that like, just because it is the general norm, it doesn't mean there aren't outliers and aren't other ways to do it. And I think even with society's timeline of like so many people thinking we should be married at 25, kids by 30, have a house, like, I just think that is such crap. I think we have all been called to our own timelines and our own purposes and callings in life, and that looks different for everybody. I know somebody that got happily married in her 40s to the love of her life, And like, that was her timeline. And it might look crazy or like, was something wrong with her? Why didn't she get married sooner? But like, that was what God had for her on that timeline. And so I just think with all things regarding time, like, we just can't understand why some things happen this way and others don't. So I'm really hesitant to like put anything on a societal timeline and say like, that's normal.
I have a question for Mel, since Mel's married, and I'm just curious to learn about like, how intentional were you and Owen? And what's some like advice that you would give to people that are dating around intentionality?
We met when we were 24, and I'm assuming you two were older when you met.
Yeah, 27.
24?
Yeah.
Okay, it sounded... My assumption when you guys were telling your story was that you guys were in your 30s based on the maturity level of the story. But I would say that when we just met, we were both like still figuring out our faith. We had just moved to the city. So many unknowns in life. And thankfully, Owen was very intentional when we first started dating. On our third date, he was like, we're exclusive, right? And then
Oh, that's awesome.
I guess we are now. And we were officially boyfriend and girlfriend like a month later. But
Amazing.
we did date for 2 years. But yeah, the fact that we did date for 2 years was really good. And I feel really comfortable with that amount of time because, like you were saying, I had peace after 2 years. And I think any earlier I would be freaking out and maybe like throwing in the towel or something. Age can tend to play a factor, or just, I guess, maturity level, because I definitely think we both grew a bunch in maturity while we were dating, and we figured out a lot about ourselves while we were dating too. But it seemed like it's different because the two of you already like knew who you were, you knew what you wanted, and I think we were figuring it out in tandem, but it somehow miraculously, like, God just blessed it because it like happened to align as we were dating and figuring things out.
I think you bring up a really great point. We talk as if like the age and where we are in life, I think maybe is normal because it was just our experience. But like, a lot of people do meet the right people earlier when they haven't figured things out. And I think it would make way less sense to do it quickly. And I think that's why like ours was kind of unique in that we both already knew who we were and what we wanted. But had we met earlier, it wouldn't have been that way. You know, it would have taken more time because you still have to figure out, even if you meet a great person, you can over time figure out, you know, what you want in life and does this person align? And maybe that can't happen as quickly. So I think sometimes like we have to remember too, like, you know, everybody's at different phases in life when you meet your person. And so you have to adjust and factor that in with intentionality wherever you are.
I have a question for Serena. Your question was around like societal norms, I believe. Yeah. Do you feel any pressure around like dating and societal norms and having to meet those things?
Well, culturally, I'm from India, so the societal norms play a big role in how you make decisions, to the point where when I was younger, I thought I was going to do an arranged marriage.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And one day I told my dad on September 13th, I was like, I know the day.
He's got a pin for it.
I prayed a lot, and I told my dad, I was like, I don't think I like Indian guys, so I don't think I could do an arranged marriage. And my dad was like, okay. So he changed his mind on September 13th because he was like, I would much rather have a married daughter than a daughter like that I restrict for this reason. But I think it was because he was raised to have that expectation.
Of course.
I think about societal norms more so from that standpoint, like where I'm like, oh, like I lived in India and like this is how we taught, and then now here people seem to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And your parents don't tell you anything.
Yeah.
Or even at like work, or like people ask me about like, oh, like have you guys moved in together? Like, have you thought about it? And I was like, I'll be shipped back to my country if I do anything like that. Like, you guys don't understand. So I think for me, it's so interesting to hear perspectives of people that find who they are when their identity has never been built by society, or they've like broken it down at some point. So I think that's why I'm really curious. And even when we were talking about it yesterday, you were saying people will have an expectation of you, but they're not going to go home and think about, okay, Serena made this decision. I'm still thinking about why she made this decision.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's great perspective. And I wouldn't have had that if I didn't ask you that question, who thinks completely differently from I.
Well, I want to ask Mel a question because she's married. And I think it's a great perspective. for you and Owen, did you guys have like lists, and how did you know that Owen was like the one, and like how did you figure out all of that?
Yeah, no list. Absolutely none. I don't know if he had one. I should ask him.
Yeah, let's bring him on. Let's
Yeah, next episode. I definitely didn't have a list, and I think I was just approaching dating just to date because it's probably good to do that if you want to get married at some point in your life. And so that's what I was doing.
Fair.
Not really thinking about it, which maybe I should have in hindsight. It just turned out that Owen was a good guy, so I got really lucky. But I think that as we were approaching marriage conversations and actually making that decision, the one thing I was so stuck on for at least 6 months as we were talking about it, and we were reading The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller, which is a great book.
Amazing book.
The one thing I was stuck on is you're stuck with this person forever. What if they changed to be some person that you didn't think that they were going to become, or like all of a sudden are just this super different person that you don't like anymore? You're stuck. The biggest thing for me that brought a lot of peace with that, the book talks about like seeing the other person as the statue of David.
Wow.
But they're not a complete version of it. It's still that rectangular block, like being chipped at slowly.
Yeah.
And so the question to ask yourself is, are you like seeing that person being chipped away slowly over time?
Wow.
And I really did. And I thought that the best quality that Owen had is the fact that he was just so open to learning and growing and changing in the way that God is calling him to, even though he didn't really know what it was yet. He's actually still figuring it out, and so am I. But I think that was the biggest anchor for me to feel confident going into marriage, because I knew that if he's just letting God work on him, then it's going to be okay. And I need to trust that it'll be okay. And I shouldn't like lean into that anxiety.
That's so real. I think what you said about the growth mindset, that Owen just was open to growing, I strongly believe that was one of the best characteristics that you can look for in a spouse. Because like I mentioned earlier, like we've changed so much since we've been married, that if somebody isn't constantly wanting to grow and get better, that when you hold up that mirror of marriage to them and you show them their flaws, if they don't have a growth mindset, they're going to see those flaws and be like, I don't see that. No, you're wrong. You change. And I think being married to somebody that has enough humility to be like, yeah, I can always be getting better. Every day I want to get a little bit better. I think that is one of the best formulas or recipes to be able to grow together over the long term, is like just something that I think everybody should have in life, like always wanting to get better, because marriage is constantly changing. Life is constantly changing. There's always new obstacles.
I wanted to add a story, and then I'm going to ask you guys the question back. But just one thing I've been really like blessed by in my marriage is just seeing Owen go into our walk-in closet every day, because we live in a studio. So he goes every morning, he wakes up, makes a coffee, goes into our walk-in closet to pray. And in our time off of unemployment, because we quit our jobs after we got married 7 months ago, but in this time off, he's been using it so well. And I've actually been seeing so much transformation in him, like seeing how much more he loves God. Like he cried today during worship, which was so beautiful. And like he never did that before. He was never emotionally moved by God. And so it's just been really cool to see like his time with the Lord and how he's been growing. And I think like, I'm like, dang, even if I like didn't feel love for you anymore, I just want to see how this plays out until the end. You know, like I'm just here for the plot, which is like fun, but also just so awesome to like be a close-up witness to how God is moving in his life.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool. And I'm like, this is so awesome. And so I'm just curious for the both of you, like, how have you seen these things in each other? Like, what's one specific niche, like walk-in closet example that you guys can share?
I'm glad that you mentioned that. That reminds me to walk further into my closet. That's amazing. Like literally, that's amazing. I need to talk to Owen more about that. What do you have anything, baby?
Yeah, something comes to mind. I think it was maybe a year ago. I don't remember what it was we were fighting over. We were fighting over something, and I thought you were being the biggest jerk about it. And I wish I could remember what it was, but I just thought he was being such a jerk.
Me?
And something we've done in our marriage is we've selected people that we can share anything with. I think there's a common saying that like you shouldn't tell your parents, for example, about like fights with your spouse because they hear the negative thing, but rarely do you go back and share like how you made up. And so you don't want people to hold grudges against your spouse. And so something that we've done is we've chosen, I think it's about 2 people each. And both of these people, they know us both really well. And so not only do we trust that like one of them is my best friend. And so I can tell her anything about Ely, and she knows him well enough that I know that even though I might be saying something negative about him, she knows where it's coming from and she's not holding it against him. And also the other thing these people have in common is we trust their character. So I know if Ely goes and complains about me to his person, that I trust that person's character enough that he's not going to give Ely bad advice like, oh, bro, maybe you should divorce her. So we've chosen these people that we trust and that know us well. And so after one of our fights, I had gone to one of my people and I told her everything about like what a jerk he was being, whatever. And we prayed about it together. And then like 6 months later, I came back to her and I was like, you wouldn't believe what Ely just said to me and like what he's doing now. And we just had this moment of like, wow, so much transformation in his perspective and mindset on something that really bothered me that we had prayed about, that he had completely changed perspective on and was now actually like driving the thing.
What was it? Tell me.
No, I remember it now.
I'm just curious before you put it up there.
No, now that I'm talking about it, I kind of remember. It was something to do spiritually. I was like upset that like you didn't want to like pray more with me or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was 6 months later that you decided that like we as a family, like we should do the Daniel's fast together.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah.
And then every
Did the
day
fast.
you were starting your day with like 30 minutes or an hour of like worship and prayer.
Yeah.
And then I started doing it with you.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, whoa, he would have never done this 6 months ago.
That's true.
And so when I was telling my friend about it, it was just like, wow, how cool to see like how things can transform. And it's not like that Ely was against those things. It was just like, I think the season of life we were in, I was just upset that it wasn't more of a priority.
Yeah.
And so just kind of seeing the transformation and the shift was like, oh, that was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. Lost 10 pounds. Daniel's fast. Lost 10 pounds, gotta say. If you want to lose weight, Daniel's fast is for you.
Multi-benefits.
Multi-benefits. I think for me, something that's changed for her is she's gotten really, really tough. Super tough. And like she's come a long way. Now, she's always been tough, and people will tell you that before like we even met. She's always been tough. But when I met Allie, I think she was a lot more of like a people pleaser. And I think even whenever we got married or whenever we were getting married and she recognized all the different like attributes and needs of my culture, she was trying to like appease all of my family members and my culture and how things are done. And even like with people, like she's just very nice and very kind, which is like an amazing attribute of hers. But sometimes it kind of leaks into like people pleasing and thinking about what other people think. But I think she's gotten like really, really tough and confident with who she is and where she's going, to the point where like she is so she's so like steadfast in like who she is and what she wants to do, that I think it just brings out so many amazing attributes, because there are certain things that she just won't put up with. And some things are things that she won't put up with me, like how I talk to her, if I'm mean, or if I'm rude, if I don't spend enough time with her, because we have to have that quality time. So I've seen her grow through that. So instead of her like keeping it all internally or keeping it all in her heart, I think she's gotten really, really tough and being able to communicate her needs, wants, what's important, what's valuable, and living that out. And that's been really beautiful to see. So I would say that was, the chipping of the statue that I've seen from Allison.
I think you bring up a good point that I think not enough people talk about. I had a full identity crisis when we got married, which like my entire 20s, I was the person who always knew what I wanted. I went to college knowing what I wanted to major. I knew exactly what I wanted to do in the workforce. Like I just always knew what I wanted. And so before we met, I was like, I'm whole. I'm 100% human, kind of like what I was saying earlier. Like I don't need anybody to be happy. I know what I want. I know where I'm going. When we got married, all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, who am I? And there was a complete shift. And I think stepping into this identity as a wife and this other person, something that was really hard for me was we had a lot in common. We're both outgoing. We're both social. We're both like, that's probably a good example. We're both, we're both charismatic and outgoing. We're both risk takers. So I thought those qualities about myself really strongly. When I met Ely, I was like, maybe I'm not as outgoing as I thought, because he's even more outgoing than me. And maybe I'm not as risky as I thought, because he wants to take even bigger risks. And I had this moment of like, then who am I? Am I not outgoing? Am I not a risk taker? Am I not these other things? And I literally had to almost rebuild my identity, because at the same time, marrying into his culture, there were so many expectations. And we talk about this on episode 3. It's juicy. there was so many expectations, and I wanted to be liked, like to the point that we had our wedding in a state where most his family was, that I had only been to. Had I even been before we got married?
No.
I went once to visit.
Yeah.
We had our wedding in a state I had only been in once because it was so important to me to like be more comfortable for his family. And I regret that so much now for so many reasons. But I just think like, man, I over-indexed to please people. And I think because all of that happened around the time we got married, it just like took me for a ride identity wise. And I had to it took me maybe a year or two, like you're saying, like now I'm back to who I used to be, which is like, I know what I want. I don't put up with stuff anymore. But it took me a few years. And in the beginning of our marriage, I remember thinking like, this isn't like, you haven't seen the real me. Like I'm better, I swear.
Yeah, right.
But it took me
You
a
kept saying
while.
that.
Yeah, because I just knew.
She kept saying like, I used to be a lot better back then.
Because I just knew something was off, and it took me a while, I think, to like really grow confident. And I say this too to friends now getting married, like especially if you're taking somebody's last name, it took me at least a year to like confidently introduce myself with my new last name because it sounded so foreign, and it was like kind of weird to me. It also took a year to really mentally internalize, this is my family. I think for the first year when we would have bad fights, I sometimes would think like, oh, I could go home. Like I could call my mom, or, you know, I could go like rely on my support system. And now I'm like, team us. Yeah. It is us against the world. But like that took time to really build that identity in our family and almost let go of a past identity of who I was with my other last name. And obviously our family is still our family. But when we now describe our family, we're referring to us. We're not referring to anybody else. And I think that identity shift took me some time. And I think with that, I almost had to rebuild, like, who am I? What do I want? Where am I going? Because so much kind of got muddied during the marriage process. And I don't think enough people talk about that.
Yeah.
When you had your list, did you have race on the list?
Oh. Ding, ding.
You want to answer at the same time?
Okay. 1, 2, 3. No.
No, race, definitely not race. I had a like body type. This was something I did mention on an episode where I was saying like what is it called? A nice to have. I've always wanted somebody who was like thick and large. Like one time, what?
I'm a little hefty, okay? I used to be.
One
When
time,
she met me, I was like 255, 260.
yeah, somebody tried to set me up with somebody like skinny ones, like, and I was just like, no offense to skinny guys. It just wasn't my thing. I've just never been interested in like, you know, the skater skinny type guys. I always wanted somebody that was like thick and muscular. And literally, Ely, he joked like that he couldn't lose the weight. He's a big guy. Like he averages 240-ish. So, I mean, he's hefty. And that to me was just like, I just know that I do find that more attractive. But no, I didn't care what race he came in, what package it came in.
Yeah, I didn't either. I didn't either. I think I was definitely pretty open to any race. I just didn't. I think when it comes to race, the only thing that was in the back of my mind was how my culture would deal with it. And so earlier I mentioned that I didn't care about what they thought. And sure, I don't, but I do recognize as well too that like my culture has an expectation, and maybe yours does as well too. And therefore I think about how would my culture perceive or deal with a culture that they're not familiar with. So Allie is obviously white, and the U.S. is predominantly white. Texas is predominantly white. Texas is predominantly white. You guys didn't know? Really? Really? Yeah. And so whenever I thought about dating, I was like, okay, well, like that is obviously easier for my family to be familiar with, but what if I dated someone that was like Indian? What if I dated someone that was like Asian? Texas doesn't have a lot of Asian people, at least compared to California, right? So I did think about that. Not that it influenced my mind per se, but I did think about like, how does my culture interact and deal with something that they're not familiar with? Because when you get married, you bring on your family's culture and everything that comes with that family and that culture, not just like your race, right? You bring it with a lot. 100%. So I thought about how my family would adapt and adopt some of those things. But she turned out to be white.
I will.
which is great.
I will say that the person I dated last before him was white, and they were from Alabama, and I was actually way more cautious about that because I've grown up in the Bay Area in a very diverse climate. I went to a predominantly African church growing up. And so as I got older, racial justice started to be something that was really important to me. And so dating a white guy from Alabama, I remember we started talking about going to meet his family. And I started asking him questions like about race, and I wanted to go visit. There's this big museum there that I remember I saw Oprah went to once, and it was like about slavery. And I was like, oh, if we go, I'd love to go see this. And I remember he started to get kind of weird. And that to me was a huge red flag. So while I didn't have a racial preference per se, it was really important to me to be with somebody that understood the dynamics of race, because I didn't want to marry somebody that was ignorant about race. I think that was something that was really important to me that I was assessing while dating, but I wasn't like looking for a particular color per se. Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. We hope this was interesting. If there's any juicy, spicy questions that weren't asked that you guys wish would have been asked, make sure you drop those in the comments or DM us, and we'll make sure to answer them on a future episode.
Goodbye.
Bye. We're out. That's a wrap.